But let's talk about personal finance. Our topic today is very interesting. If you are a conservative investor and if you don't want to subject yourselves to the choppiness of the markets, which you are seeing currently, then perhaps a good place to invest would be into some of these hybrid funds, a mix of debt and equity funds, or some of these close-ended hybrid schemes that don't have too much of an exposure to equity. Hemant Rustagi of Wiseinvest Advisors joins us now. Hemant, hi, good afternoon to you. First up, how good an idea is a hybrid fund in case an investor finds it difficult to follow a proper asset allocation?
Well, let me begin with the asset allocation process itself. Asset allocation, I believe, is the key to investment success in the long run. That's because it helps investors in deciding the right balance between risk and reward. And also, investors can find out as to what kind of risk are they taking in their portfolio and what kind of return they can expect from their portfolio. But unfortunately, not many investors follow the asset allocation process. That's because maybe many of them find the whole process a little cumbersome. But the fact is, like I mentioned earlier, that asset allocation helps an investor in finding the right balance between risk and reward. So they must try and follow that. For those investors who need help, hybrid fund can definitely be a good option to practice asset allocation, as it allows them to invest in funds with a pre-decided asset mix. There are a variety of hybrid funds on offer from mutual funds, and investors can benefit in more than one ways. To begin with, as I mentioned earlier, that investors have an opportunity to invest in funds with a pre-decided asset mix. Now, for example, someone who wants to restrict his exposure to equity can look at debt-oriented hybrid fund. There are a variety of MIP which are available, and these funds typically have exposure to equity as low as 5%, and then as high as 25%. So depending on what is the comfort level of investor, one can choose debt-oriented hybrid funds. There are also equity-oriented hybrid funds here. These funds typically invest around 65 to 70% in equity, and the rest of the money is invested in debt. And there are also asset allocation funds where the allocation to different asset class depends on the market condition. Now, for example, the exposure to equity would depend on the P of the market. There are also multi-asset classes fund which invest in debt, gold, and equity, and there are also other varieties like investing in debt and equity. So I think, like I mentioned, there are a lot of variety which is available to them. The second most important benefit for retail investors especially is that they don't have to worry about rebalancing the portfolio, which is again key to investment success. That is because each of these funds have a cap on how much exposure can be had for a particular asset class. For example, if the exposure to equity goes beyond the stipulated level, the fund manager will sell equity and increase the exposure to debt. And if the exposure to equity goes below the stipulated level, then he will invest more money in that. And the third major benefit is that this is a very tax-efficient method of rebalancing, especially for retail investors. That is because they are liable to pay tax only when they act. That means if they either switch or redeem. And since all this rebalancing is done by the fund manager himself, they are not liable to pay any tax. So as is evident, there is a lot that these hybrid funds offer. But of course, there is a flip side too. One, the entire money has to be entrusted to either a single fund house or a couple of the fund houses. Now, which means that if the fund house does not have the same capability in managing different asset classes like debt and equity, then the performance can suffer. That's why I think choosing the right fund is very, very important for any investor who's looking at hybrid fund. Second is that investors may not have the opportunity to invest in variety of funds of following different strategies, different philosophies. But then we are talking about investors who need help in terms of asset allocation, so it may not be a major negative for them. So I believe that hybrid funds can definitely be a good option, a good starting point for investors. Once they become more comfortable with different asset classes, the manner of investing, and what all it takes basically to get the best out of each asset class, then maybe gradually they can look at other funds. But definitely a good starting point for most of the investors.
Okay, Hemant, actually a caller is waiting by, so we have to hurry. Lalit Mishra from Jabalpur is calling us. Go ahead, Lalit ji, what is your question? Mr. Lalit Mishra, can you hear me?
Hello.
Kahiye, what is your question?
क्वेश्चन ये था मैडम
Yes.
कि हमें एक टर्म प्लान चाहिए था. ऑनलाइन टर्म प्लान के लिए हम अपने ब्रदर इन लॉ के लिए ट्राई कर रहे थे.
अच्छा.
उनकी एज करीब 40 साल है और 25 साल के लिए हमें टर्म प्लान चाहिए था ऑनलाइन. तो कौन सा टर्म प्लान बेहतर रहेगा?
ओके.
ये पता करना था. और दूसरा एक और क्वेश्चन था
जी
कि हमने जब नेट में कुछ सर्वे किया तो उसमें कुछ एक कंपनीज में जो हमने उनके फॉर्म वगैरह भरे तो उसमें जो सेलेक्ट सिटीज है उनकी, उसमें गुलबर्गा का नाम नहीं था जहाँ वो रहते हैं।
अच्छा।
तो जब उनसे बात की तो उन्होंने बोला कि आप कोई और एड्रेस देके भी ये टर्म प्लान कर सकते हैं। तो क्या ये सही होगा ऐसा करना? ये 2 क्वेश्चन थे।
अच्छा, 1 मिनट आप फोन पे बने रहिए ललित जी। हमें शायद कॉमर्स मिनिस्टर की बात सुननी है, उसके बाद हम आपके सवाल का जवाब एक्सपर्ट से लेंगे। वेल हेमंत, द कॉलर हैड वेरी क्लियर क्वेश्चंस, प्लीज गो अहेड।
Well, I think there are a few companies where I think he can try and see as far as term plan is concerned. You can look at HDFC Life, you can look at Tata AIA, and you can also look at ICICI Pru Life. He mentioned about having some problem for a particular district like Gulbarg. Well, I think I don't see any problem really as such, because there is a facility today to upload the documents on the net itself, and if that is not possible, then the documents can be couriered actually to the stipulated or the designated branch of insurance company. तो मुझे लगता है आप ये कोशिश कीजिए, ये डेफिनेटली आपको यहाँ पे कुछ प्रॉब्लम नहीं आएगा। और उनकी जो एज है आपने बताया है, उसमें करीब 9 से 10 हज़ार रुपए का इनको प्रीमियम यहाँ पे लगेगा। और अगर कुछ मेडिकल ट्रिगर होता है तो इंश्योरेंस कंपनी आपको आपसे बात करेगी और आपको बताएगी कि आपको क्या करना है। तो मुझे लगता है ये 3 कंपनीज मैंने आपको बताया, इनमें आप ट्राई कीजिए। मुझे आपको लगता नहीं आपको कुछ प्रॉब्लम होनी चाहिए।
Okay, finally, Hemant, some examples of hybrid funds as well. I was hoping that you would give us some companies which offer these products.
Well, I think there are quite a few good quality hybrid funds. For example, if you look at debt and equity, there is HDFC Prudence, which is a balanced fund, Can Robeco balanced fund, Reliance balanced fund, and then there is a Can Indigo fund, which invests in debt and gold, and there is Access Triple Advantage fund, which invests in gold, equity, and debt. So these are some of the examples that are available in the market.
All right. Thanks so much, Hemant, for that. We'll have to leave it at that. We should actually pull up MM.